For years, I thought choosing myself meant hurting other people. I thought saying no made me selfish. I thought having needs made me difficult. So I kept shrinking, over-explaining, overgiving, tolerating, adapting, and abandoning myself in small ways that slowly became my entire personality. I called it love. I called it maturity. I called it being a good person. But one day I realized something that changed my life completely. Prioritizing myself was not betraying anyone. It was finally stopping the betrayal of myself. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt guilty simply for wanting to protect your peace? Have you ever felt selfish for saying no, setting boundaries, resting, asking for reciprocity, choosing your own needs, or emotionally stepping back from people who constantly drained you? If you've ever felt that kind of guilt, I really want you to tell me in the comments. And while you're there, tell me where you're watching from, because so many women quietly struggle with this exact emotional conflict. They know they are exhausted. They know they are emotionally depleted. They know they keep abandoning themselves for relationships, expectations, obligations, or approval. But the moment they try to choose themselves, guilt immediately appears. Stay with me until the end of this episode, because today we're talking about one of the most important emotional shifts a person can make: learning how to prioritize yourself without believing you are becoming selfish. We're going to talk about why so many women feel guilty when they stop overgiving, how cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, explains these automatic guilt responses, and how emotional healing begins when someone finally understands that self-respect is not cruelty and self-prioritization is not betrayal. Because sometimes guilt appears not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are finally doing something unfamiliar. One of the deepest emotional conditioning patterns many women carry is the belief that being loved requires self-abandonment. Not consciously, usually, but psychologically. They learn early that being good means being accommodating, easy, giving, understanding, patient, self-sacrificing, emotionally available, helpful, flexible, pleasant. They learn to monitor other people's comfort before checking their own emotional state. They become highly attuned to disappointment, rejection, disapproval, or conflict. And over time, this creates a dangerous internal pattern. Their worth becomes connected to how much of themselves they are willing to give away. That's why choosing themselves later feels emotionally terrifying, because it activates guilt immediately. Not necessarily because they're doing something wrong, but because prioritizing themselves conflicts with old beliefs like, if I disappoint people, I'm selfish. If I stop overgiving, people won't love me. My needs create problems. Good people sacrifice more. I have to earn rest, love, or care. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy becomes incredibly important. CBT explains that emotional reactions are deeply connected to automatic thoughts and core beliefs. And many women who struggle to prioritize themselves are not struggling with selfishness at all. They're struggling with conditioned guilt attached to self-protection. The brain interprets self-prioritization as danger. Why? Because historically, self-abandonment may have been what maintained approval, connection, emotional safety, or belonging. So when the woman finally starts saying, "No, I can't do that. That hurts me. I need space. I'm tired. I matter too," her nervous system reacts with guilt automatically. And this creates enormous confusion. She starts thinking, am I becoming cold? Am I selfish now? Am I overreacting? Why do I feel guilty for protecting myself? But guilt is not always proof of wrongdoing. Sometimes guilt is simply the emotional discomfort of breaking old survival patterns. That distinction changes everything. Because healthy self-prioritization does not mean becoming self-centered, cruel, emotionally unavailable, or indifferent to others. It means finally recognizing that your emotional needs matter too. It means stopping the unconscious belief that love requires permanent self-erasure. And honestly, this shift can feel deeply uncomfortable at first. Because when someone has spent years over-functioning emotionally for everyone else, choosing themselves feels emotionally unnatural. The nervous system interprets self-protection as rejection of others. Boundaries feel rude. Rest feels lazy. Saying no feels aggressive. Emotional distance feels cruel. But that discomfort is often part of healing. Today I want to talk about that guilt. The guilt that appears when a woman finally stops abandoning herself. The emotional fear of becoming selfish. The internal conflict between care for others and care for self. And how CBT helps people slowly rebuild healthier beliefs around boundaries, self-worth, emotional responsibility, and the right to exist without constantly sacrificing themselves for approval. Because choosing yourself is not betrayal. Sometimes it is the first honest act after years of disappearing inside everyone else's needs. For most of her life, Lily believed being needed was the same thing as being valuable. She was the reliable one, the understanding one, the emotionally available one, the one who always adjusted, always helped, always explained, always forgave, always stayed. And at first, people praised her for it. They called her kind, selfless, loving, mature. What nobody noticed was that Lily was slowly disappearing underneath that identity. She had become so emotionally focused on maintaining peace, avoiding disappointment, and taking care of everyone else's emotional comfort that she no longer knew how to recognize her own needs without guilt immediately appearing afterward. Even small acts of self-prioritization felt emotionally uncomfortable. Saying no made her anxious. Canceling plans filled her with guilt. Resting felt undeserved. Setting boundaries felt cruel. Choosing herself felt selfish. And because those feelings were so strong, Lily automatically assumed they must mean something morally true about her. That's something CBT explains very clearly. People often confuse emotional discomfort with evidence. Lily thought, if I feel guilty, I must be doing something wrong. But emotions are not always objective truth. Sometimes they are conditioned reactions. Lily's guilt came from years of internal beliefs like, my value comes from being useful. Other people's feelings matter more. If I disappoint someone, I become bad. Love requires sacrifice. Those beliefs shaped her behavior for years. So, when Lily finally started trying to protect herself emotionally, her nervous system reacted as if she were doing something dangerous. That's what made healing so confusing. Part of her knew she was exhausted, but another part of her still felt responsible for everyone else's comfort. This became especially painful in relationships. Lily constantly overextended herself emotionally. She tolerated things that hurt her. She stayed available when she was depleted. She ignored resentment. She overexplained boundaries. She kept giving long after she emotionally needed rest. And slowly, she realized something devastating. She had built an entire identity around being emotionally convenient for other people. That realization broke her heart a little, because now she had to face a painful question. If I stop overgiving, will people still love me? That fear sits underneath many women's guilt. Not fear of selfishness, fear of abandonment. And once Lily finally understood that, everything started making more sense psychologically. One of the most powerful things CBT teaches is how automatic thoughts quietly shape emotional reactions without us fully noticing. Lily started observing thoughts like, they'll think I'm selfish. I'm disappointing people. I should do more. I'm being dramatic. Good people don't act like this. I'm responsible for their feelings. These thoughts happened instantly, automatically, almost invisibly. And because they felt emotionally intense, Lily assumed they were facts. But CBT helped her slow those thoughts down and question them. Was setting a boundary actually cruel? Or did it only feel cruel because she had been conditioned to over-accommodate everyone for years? That distinction changed everything. Because Lily slowly began realizing that many of her guilt responses were not signs of moral failure. They were signs that she was interrupting deeply ingrained self-abandonment patterns. CBT calls this cognitive restructuring. Instead of automatically believing, saying no makes me selfish, she learned to replace it with, saying no protects my emotional capacity. Instead of, I'm responsible for everyone's comfort, she practiced, I can care about people without abandoning myself. Instead of, if people are disappointed, I've done something wrong, she learned, other people's discomfort is not always evidence of my wrongdoing. Those shifts sound simple intellectually, but emotionally, they can feel revolutionary. Because for someone like Lily, self-sacrifice had become emotionally tied to identity itself. Without overgiving, she felt guilty. Without rescuing, she felt anxious. Without over-explaining, she felt cold. But slowly, she started noticing something important. The more she stopped abandoning herself, the more emotionally stable she actually became. Not colder, not crueler, not selfish, more honest. That honesty changed her relationships too. Some people reacted badly to her new boundaries. And honestly, that hurt. But CBT helped her understand something difficult. People who benefited from her self-abandonment were often the most uncomfortable when she stopped offering it automatically. That realization created grief. Because Lily had to confront how many relationships depended on her over-functioning emotionally. But she also began discovering something beautiful. Healthy relationships did not collapse when she started valuing herself too. Healthy relationships adjusted, communicated, respected limits, made space for reciprocity. And for the first time in years, Lily started experiencing relationships where she did not have to disappear in order to remain loved. That changed her understanding of love completely. The most healing moment came when Lily stopped seeing self-prioritization as rejection of others. For years, her brain had framed the situation incorrectly. Either care for others or care for self. CBT helped her understand that healthy emotional functioning was not built around extremes. It was not only care about yourself, but it was also not erase yourself for everyone else. Healthy emotional balance exists in the middle. And honestly, that middle ground felt deeply unfamiliar to Lily at first. She was so used to emotional over-responsibility that simply protecting her own energy felt emotionally uncomfortable. But discomfort did not mean she was becoming selfish. It meant she was practicing new emotional behaviors her nervous system was not accustomed to yet. That distinction became incredibly important. Because once Lily stopped interpreting guilt as evidence of wrongdoing, she could finally begin building a healthier relationship with herself. She started asking different questions. What do I actually need right now? Am I saying yes from love or from fear? Would I expect someone I love to constantly abandon themselves like this? Why do I feel guilty for treating myself like someone who matters too? Those questions rebuilt something inside her slowly. Not arrogance, not selfishness, self-respect. And self-respect feels very different emotionally. Selfishness ignores other people entirely. Self-respect simply stops ignoring yourself. That realization softened something inside Lily. Because she finally understood that prioritizing herself did not mean she no longer cared about others. It meant she had stopped believing her own well-being was automatically less important. That shift changed everything. She became calmer, clearer, more emotionally regulated, less resentful, less exhausted, less emotionally fragmented. And interestingly, her relationships became healthier too. Because when people stop overgiving compulsively, their care becomes more authentic instead of fear-driven. Lily no longer helped people because she feared rejection. She helped because she genuinely wanted to. And that distinction created emotional freedom. She finally understood that choosing herself was not betrayal. It was responsibility. Responsibility toward the person she had abandoned the longest. Herself. So let me end this episode with something I think many women desperately need to hear. Choosing yourself does not make you selfish. Saying no is not cruelty. Rest is not laziness. Boundaries are not attacks. Needs are not moral failures. You're allowed to matter too. And if prioritizing yourself feels uncomfortable, that does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it simply means you are breaking emotional patterns that taught you your value depended on how much of yourself you were willing to sacrifice. That discomfort is real, but it is not permanent. Lily did not become colder when she stopped abandoning herself. She became healthier. She stopped confusing exhaustion with love. Stopped confusing self-erasure with kindness. Stopped confusing guilt with morality. And slowly, she built something many women never realize they are missing until much later. An internal life where her own emotional well-being mattered too. That changed everything. Because emotional maturity is not learning how to care less about others. It is learning how to care about others without continuously disappearing from your own life in the process. And maybe the most important thing CBT teaches in situations like this is that guilt is not always a trustworthy compass. Sometimes guilt appears when you finally stop betraying yourself. Sometimes guilt appears when you finally stop overfunctioning emotionally for everyone else. Sometimes guilt appears the moment you begin acting like your own humanity deserves care too. And honestly, it does. You do not need permission to become your own priority again. Now I really want to hear from you. Have you ever felt guilty simply for choosing yourself? What situations triggered that guilt the most? Saying no, setting boundaries, resting, ending relationships, asking for reciprocity, protecting your peace. And when did you realize there was a difference between selfishness and self-respect? Tell me your story in the comments, because so many women are silently trying to rebuild themselves while still feeling emotionally guilty for taking up space in their own lives. And if this episode spoke to you, like the video, share it with someone who needs this conversation, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode. Because choosing yourself is not becoming selfish. It is finally refusing to keep abandoning the person who has needed your care the longest. You.